We're going to dive into this. We're going to dive into the words of Jesus, but we need to backtrack a little bit. And, there's this Russian novelist, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He spent 8 years in Stalin's prison camps. And he would later write, "It was only when I lay on rotting prison straw that I sensed within myself the first stirrings of good." He had time to lay there and reflect and consider life. And it's strange how clarity often comes in confinement. It's interesting how truth can emerge in darkness, how wisdom can arrive in chains. History's deepest insights have often come from the darkest jail cells. Paul, he wrote about the mystery of Christ while he was in Roman chains. John received the book of Revelation while he was exiled to Patmos. Bonhoeffer, he would pen some of his most profound thoughts while he was in Nazi jails. This is exactly where we find Peter. It was not on his fishing boat in Galilee's waters, not in the upper room with bread and wine, but in a prison cell that he would pen the last words of his earthly life. And what he wishes to call his readers' minds to with those precious last moments are telling. He doesn't turn to found his last letter on walking on water. That would, of all the things in my life, let me remind you of when I walked on water. Don't remember me in jail going to my death sentence. Remember that I was the one that got out of the boat and walked on water. That's what I might draw attention to. It's neither is it witnessing the empty tomb and the resurrection. Peter comes to found his last letter upon a moment on a mountain when he completely misunderstood everything. And God began to flip the script on him. If you go to the title slide, Tim, the title of this sermon is part 1 of Jesus flipping the script. I love it. You can plug into AI anything. And I said, I want an icon of Jesus flipping the script. And Jesus is flipping the script. And he's there with the Pharisees and with his disciples. And so it's Jesus flipping the script. And this is on the mountain where Jesus flipped the script on Peter. But Peter didn't even realize it yet. And so think about this. Peter's the one who tried desperately to keep Jesus from the cross. He's the one who earned the rebuke, the highest rebuke of any disciple. Get behind me, Satan. He chooses as his final testimony a moment when he witnesses the conversation between Moses, Elijah, and Jesus about the very thing that he was opposing, the cross. Luke tells us Moses and Elijah spoke of Jesus' exodus, his trip to the cross is what they were talking about on the Mount of Transfiguration. The law and the prophets, embodied in Moses and Elijah, they're seen by Peter doing what we learn they were always doing, speaking of the Christ and the cross. Later in Luke, as Jesus encounters 2 bewildered disciples post-crucifixion on their way to Emmaus, Jesus encounters them and they don't even recognize him. They're bewildered. They don't understand the cross and why this all happened. Jesus demonstrates to them the lesson of the transfiguration. It says that he tells them from Moses to Elijah, from the law and the prophets, let me show you what Scripture was saying. That all of this was to happen, the journey to the cross. He tells them that the law and the prophets have always been telling about him, the work to usher him in, and the work to bring him to the cross. Peter on the mountain doesn't get any of it, any more than the 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus had gotten it yet. He wants to have Jesus and. He wants Jesus and the law, Jesus and the prophets. But as he's voicing, let's do Jesus and, Matthew says God interrupts him. As he's saying this, God interrupts Peter, and the voice of God interrupts him and says, Jesus is my sole voice. Listen to him. Moses and Elijah are taken away. Jesus is the voice to listen to. Peter struggles with it, though. And we're not so different from Peter in his early confusion. We too want a God of glory that is defined by the things we want of this world. We want tabernacles. Peter says, let's glorify all three of you. Let's build tabernacles. Let's put you in the boxes that the world says are the places of glory. We want, in the church, 3 equal shrines to different things in our lives. Leading up through last year, many in the church wanted one for politics, one for preferences, and maybe one for Jesus. But on the mountain, the Father interrupts our religious inclinations of Jesus and. I can connect to Jesus to the things that I want to place next to him. The Father interrupts with thunder and clarity. No, this one is my Son. Listen to him. The mountain was the turning point in the gospel. From the mountain experience way up north, Jesus begins his final journey to Jerusalem. He descends the mountain of Peter's revelation experience, and he moves to Galilee through Matthew 18. As we enter into Matthew 19, Jesus then moves into Judea. He's moving south towards Jerusalem, but this geography downwards, south, it's not just details on a map. It's the physical manifestation of Jesus' journey towards the cross. As he's going to go to the cross and descend even further into death. Every step closer to Jerusalem, closer to the destiny that Moses and Elijah were discussing with him on that glorious mountain. Every step closer brings him to the cross. As Jesus makes his way down from the mountain of glory, he encounters what I feel like is what we typically get after a mountaintop experience. Religiosity and the broken reality of human relationships. It's glorious on the mountaintop. There's cool things, and then you descend the mountain and here's religion. Here's human brokenness. And the religious leaders, they approach Jesus. And the Greek text of Matthew, as we enter into Matthew 19, tells us they came to test him. The Greek word means trial. We're going to put you on trial, Jesus. They test Jesus on 4 verses. These 4 verses from Deuteronomy. It's Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. It says, suppose a man enters into marriage with a woman, but she doesn't please him because he finds something objectionable about her. So he writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of the house. She then leaves his house and goes off to become another man's wife. See if it goes on. There we go. Then, suppose the second man dislikes her, writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house. Or the second husband who married her dies. Either way, the woman has lost her second husband. Her first husband who sent her away is not permitted to take her again to be his wife after she's been defiled. There's tons here, and we're not going to get to dive into all of it. There's tons, so I know questions are probably coming up. What the heck are we to do with all this defilement and everything? One day we'll get to it all, but we're going to look at what Jesus is doing here. She's been defiled, for that would be abhorrent to the Lord. And you shall not bring guilt on the land that the Lord your God has given you as a possession. The rabbinical schools had been wrestling with these 4 verses for generations. They'd taken this minuscule passage, the only passage in the Torah to speak of divorce, and they had built entire systems around it. They had 3 boxes primarily. One school held that divorce was for finding something objectionable about your wife, and typically that was sexual immorality. Sexual immorality would make the woman objectionable to the husband, and he could divorce her in that case. It was narrow. The second school contended that even for a ruined dinner, the husband could divorce his wife. I knew this was going to open up conversations and topics. I know you're brave now because Casey's not here. I understand. The second school, Tim's favorite school, opened up what was narrow a little more broadly. The third school, though, was the broadest. It believed the wife didn't even have to do anything for the husband to divorce her. It simply could be that the woman could no longer keep her husband's attention. She'd let herself go. Time had had its way with his wife, and someone new caught his eye, and so he was now dissatisfied over here, and he just wants to leave her now. No fault of the woman, but the husband could leave her. In this third school of thought, it was the broadest power that was given to the man. Notice that all these divorces, the divorce is male prerogative. The choice of divorce rested upon the husband's choice to break the marriage. I find something objectionable with you. That's the narrowest. I'm tired of your burnt dinners, showing up late. I don't know. It got a little more broad. You know what? I'm just tired of you. I don't even need an excuse. I'm going to divorce you. The man was in charge, and all of these methods of divorce revolved around the devaluation of the wife by the husband. Now the Pharisees come to Jesus and they ask. Some Pharisees come to Jesus and to test him. And so they ask him, really the way they said it is, isn't it true that it's lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason? They want Jesus to commit to a box because then they can begin to box him out. Once you can be placed in a box, you can be boxed out of what your opponents want to exclude you from. Now, Jesus is going to reply, but he's not going to answer. There's a difference between replying and answering. We've seen through Jesus' ministry, he doesn't just hand out answer keys. He opens the door to a road to wisdom as we exercise thinking and we gain understanding. Things that I can memorize an answer to, but I may not understand it. Jesus has asked 183 questions in his ministry. And most scholars agree he answered directly to 3 of them. Leaves 180 indirectly replied to questions. This is not one of the direct questions. This is not accepted as a direct answer from Jesus. So to go to Jesus' reply, we know that we can't take it at surface level. Jesus doesn't do easy answers that are just understood on their surface. We particularly know this in this case because Jesus ends this reply just like he ends other tricky replies. It is with some variation of the phrase, anyone who can comprehend. It's Jesus' challenge to tackle a puzzle and to puzzle it out. So we're going to work on puzzling it out today. Jesus goes, reply, and he says, have you not read? The one who made them at the beginning, made them male and female. He said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. And the two shall become one flesh. one flesh. Flesh being humanity. A married couple becomes one humanity. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. This is a quote from Genesis. And in going to Genesis, Jesus changes the ground upon which this whole trial is going to engage. The Pharisees' starting point for their argument is the place where things have become broken. Jesus doesn't start from where things have gone wrong. What are the rules on divorce? Once things have gone wrong, there's a divorce. Jesus doesn't start from where things have gone wrong, but where the picture is given of how things are meant to be. The Pharisees' question really asks, what laws do we put in place to feel better about our faith? How do we legislate brokenness? How do we systematize our sin? Well, Jesus' reply seeks for us to consider what's the original good that we're all called to. We're called up to. We're not creating laws about where we've fallen down. Jesus wants to draw us to where we're meant to go up to, what we're meant to become. Pharisees start from a negative argument. Brokenness. Jesus starts from the positive of marriage. How God made it to be. Answer being, they become one. Notice that Jesus doesn't declare, as the church have wrestled with, that the purpose of marriage is the peace. Procreation is an awesome secondary side effect that often happens from marriage, but Jesus doesn't draw attention to that as a purpose for marriage. We'll go into this, and as Father John Bear puts it, the rabbis have argued endlessly about divorce, and they're seeking to build ethics upon the breakdown. They're seeking to make rules on the fallout of when things blow up. Jesus is shifting things. One other thing that he's shifting here, flipping the script. One thing that you shift here in the three main rabbinical schools that they have the million stuff. Jesus begins to flip the script by placing the woman as the lead. It's the man who has to leave his path, and the man has to go to the woman. The woman is stationary, and it's called, the man has to move to her. Jesus speaks against the rabbis arguing what the rules are. The man tells the woman to go. Jesus says, no, the man goes out of his hair and thou, the man goes to the woman. The Pharisees is then saying, in according to Deuteronomy, where it says, the man gets to say when the woman goes. Jesus' case is that divorce was not built into. How do you systematize what was not built into a system? God's system was for two to become one, and that's it. Well, the Pharisees counter with a second question, the trump question. This is the trump card. Oh, yeah? If divorce was not God's way, then why did Moses command it? The problem is that Moses never commanded it. Deuteronomy 21:4, 24, 1 through 4. We saw that, and you don't need to read it. It's little. It's what we already looked at. But it uses the word suppose. Suppose a man has a wife, and he finds something objectionable about her. And then if he gives her a divorce, suppose he finds a second husband. There's supposes. It's if. It's not certain. It's not a command. Moses said, if you're going to get a divorce, here's a rule. The problem was that the rabbis through time had fallen into the same thing Peter fell into at the Transfiguration. They held Moses to be equal to God. So that if words of Moses, the if words, what possible here, possible there, the if words of Moses are absolute words of God. Tim will turn it on here in a second. There we go. The Pharisees placed Moses highly as Peter attempted to, so that Moses' if words, the possible words of Moses, were equal to the words of God. The if words of Moses are the absolute words of God, in the Pharisees' opinion. In other words, of course, divorce was built into the system of marriage because Moses said so. Moses mentions divorce with marriage, and Moses speaks for God. But as Jesus has done in the past, Jesus is going to counter the words of even Moses. The Pharisees believe that Moses is on par with God, but Jesus trumps Moses by going back before Moses. Jesus is saying, Moses spoke in ifs and concessions. Moses told you this because you were hard-hearted. He gave a concession to your hearts. But what I'm saying, Jesus says, this is the pattern that goes back to the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, it was written, you have heard what Moses said, but I'm going to say to you something else. So Jesus says in Matthew 19:8, because you were hard-hearted and wanted to separate from your wives, Moses gave you a concession. There's a side note here. On divorce, the Pharisees had made the woman powerless in the divorce. And the woman was the problem, as she was the one to be objected to and sent away. She was the one who was a poor cook to be sent away. Or she was simply the one who had failed to keep her husband's attention, and the husband sent her away. Jesus places the woman in power as the one whom the man must move to. And then Jesus makes the man's heart the problem in the divorce. He doesn't make the woman the problem. So Jesus says that breaking up a marriage with divorce is not the way of God. It was Moses' concessionary way to a human problem, but it was not God's intent. But as we read on, Jesus, God with us, is going to share God's way on divorce. A decree of divorce is only permissible by God in the case of what in the Greek is the Greek word porneia. The key to this Greek word is that it refers to prostitution, to the selling of oneself. In marriage, there's the idea that you have given possession of yourself to another. You've given up. You've sold off your future as a single person. And you are now sold out for someone else. In marriage, two become one. But Jesus says if your wife chooses to go and sell out to another, sell her, I'm sold out for someone else over here now. Jesus says you can then give her a decree of divorce. As conceived from Moses and the Pharisees, divorce from a man ended the one unified body of marriage when the man decided when he was done with the marriage. But Jesus' allowance for divorce, in his allowance, he's saying, you've heard from Moses, but I say to you that you can only divorce your wife if she removes herself from the unified body of being sold out to you, and then she goes and joins another. This does something to the divorce decree. In Jesus' way, in Jesus' case, Jesus does not have the divorce decree actually ending a marriage. What he says is he tells the men, if your wife has already ended the marriage, if she's already gone to be sold out to another person by prostituting herself, she's chosen to separate from what was one. Your divorce decree from the husband doesn't end the marriage. It recognizes a marriage that's already been ended. Side note, as we're looking at women empowerment and what Jesus is doing here, Jesus is empowering women. Within the context of this conversation, Jesus has now placed in his process the power to break up the marriage unit into the woman's hands. And the woman is the one with control to take herself out of the marriage and go join with someone else. The man giving the divorce decree has been reduced now to filling out a form in response to the woman's lead. The woman has made her choice, and now I just fill out a form. The man's part now to give the divorce decree to the woman is no longer the man freeing himself from a woman who he finds objectionable, who burns his dinner, or who he simply is tired of. The divorce decree from the man is no longer the man freeing himself. The divorce decree from the man now gives legal freedom to the woman who has made a choice to be free from him. As the Pharisees came in hot to put Jesus on trial, that a man could toss a woman to the curb with a divorce for anything. Isn't it true that the man gets to break up the marriage? One has to wonder if Jesus is really speaking much at all about divorce, actually. Or is Jesus cloaking within the divorce conversation an attack on patriarchy? Because now, through every step of the way, he has made the woman the one in power. Well, now the Pharisees are done. Jesus has circumvented and disputed Moses, and he has placed women on the seat of power in marriage. There's even more female empowerment in the words of Jesus, and how Jesus chooses to even quote the words of Genesis just a little bit different from the original. There's more female empowerment than we can get into, but the ultimate thing to know here is that Jesus is flipping the script again. Just like he's done through his ministry, he flips the place of Moses again. He flips the place of women. The woman is the one who is established and grounded. The man is the one that goes to her. The woman is the one who is choosing to stay in the marriage or take herself somewhere else. The woman will make that decision, and the woman is the one who gets the freedom from the divorce decree, not the man. Jesus isn't done flipping the script yet. He has one more flip to go. But first, Jesus' disciples, they respond to his replies so far. The disciples come to him and they say to him, if such is the case of a man with his wife, it's better to not marry. What we can take this to mean, we might gather from the disciples that they have just seen their get out of jail free card ripped out of their hands. The divorce card has been taken away from them. Jesus has cut them off from the easy divorce whenever they're tired of the woman. And their response means, man, if we're really stuck with a woman for her entire life, if we're stuck with her when she burns our dinner, if we're stuck with her when we just no longer find her attractive, it's better to not even get married than to be chained to that. I actually consider something different, though. I consider that they've actually caught on just a little bit to Jesus' empowerment of women within marriage. And they're realizing that to get married is to give up their patriarchal position as a man over women in their society. And they're considering, if that's the way it is with a man and his wife, that the man now gives up his patriarchal power when he enters into a one humanity marriage. If in marriage you lose your male power over the woman who becomes your wife, maybe it's better not to get married because I like my male power. Moses gave the men power. But Jesus circumvents Moses to trace back to the marriage in Genesis. Two fading into one with no power over. As is common with his disciples, though, they haven't actually landed on the right answer. No, whether you think, man, it's better not to get married because I don't want to be chained to one woman my whole life. Or it's better not to get married because you give up your patriarchal authority and she gains power. Whatever it is, no, the answer is not don't get married. People don't have to get married, but it isn't better to not get married. Neither option is better than the other. But here, Jesus, he goes to what many have held as probably a top 10 of baffling passages. In response to their, maybe it's better not to get married. I know it's small. I'm going to read it. Jesus says to them, not everyone can accept this teaching, but only those to whom it is given. For there are eunuchs, sterilized men. There are eunuchs who have been so from birth. There's eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others. And there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. And now he closes with that famous phrase. Let anyone accept. The word for accept here is also understand. Let anyone understand this who can. It's to this weird passage we're going to turn next week. We're out of time this week. So we're going to turn to this passage next week. What saying or teaching is Jesus referring to that not everybody can accept this? What is it with eunuchs here? Especially eunuchs for the kingdom. Jesus' reply here is meant to invite us to work on it. And so I'm going to invite you this week to possibly work on this. Work on it and see how it strikes you. But for now, I'll invite Jonathan up. We're going to close. And for now, where I come to rest this week, I rest on a God who flips the script. I rest on a God who empowers the powerless. I rest on a God who upends the powers of this world. When we're certain that it's men that are in power, when we're certain that it's whatever the world has decided is the one in power, Jesus flips it. We don't always see it in the present, but his subversive works are moving. And his rebellious results, they will complete the changing of this world. God's always at work flipping this world upside down.